Welcome to the latest episode of 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app on Apple Podcasts, on Android, Spotify, or the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. Also, check out Off the Floor. That's our Discord server, $2.99 per month. Get off of Twitter during political season. Just talk Heat with other Heat fans. And with us, we also got exclusive Q&A, stage shows, and more. It's $2.99 per month. You won't even feel it. Trust me. Once you join this, you're not leaving. Go to Off the Floor. We post the link right here in the description. Also, check out the great sponsors of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Includes Prize Picks. You can still use our code 5. That's FIVE in the state of Florida. You put down $5 and you play it. They give you 50 more to play. Again, that's prizepicks.com. Use the code 5 FIVE. Get in before the Thursday night football game or before the football weekend. No Dolphins, no Canes this weekend, but you can play Panthers now, as well as Messi and more. So check it out, prizepicks.com. Use the code FIVE. And now, today's episode.
Down the Biscayne. Yikes. 5 on the floor. Ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing. You can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars. Wearing bubble frogs. Just like Butler said, you in trouble, y'all. Kept the floor playing. Got it all band. Y'all seen the block. Stop with one hand. And Pat we trust. It's power, have the guts. We're here to bring the heat. Y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, and Alex Toledo, plus others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network.
All right, welcome back to 5 on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick at 5 Reasons Sports. We got Greg Sylvander. You can follow him at Greg Sylvander. Make sure to check out recent episodes. Our interview episodes are all up except one. We're going to be putting up one more. Josh Richardson, we held him because he was not playing full time with the team yet, although he's working his way back. And then Khalil Ware's on that one as well. The Ware interview, we had some technical issues on media day, so we salvaged as much as we could, and we're going to put that up for you too. Also check out the GM survey, the NBA GM survey. I did that one with Sean Rochester. And then, of course, we reviewed both the scrimmage and the first preseason game. The second preseason game was postponed, supposed to be coming up on this Thursday, pushed back 6 days. Atlanta will come in then, of course, because of Hurricane Milton and all the after effects of that. And we hope, as we speak here, and Greg and I are recording this, as there's some wind outside my window. I think South Florida is going to escape most of this, but we hope everybody, wherever they are listening to us, is safe. And hopefully we can provide a little bit of entertainment here to get you through until this thing passes and no one is seriously affected in our listening audience. We're going to talk today about a couple of things. What we're going to talk. First, I want to bring up, Greg, something that we're going to get into in more depth in another episode, but I really want to be better prepared for it, and then we'll get into today's topic. So if you're not familiar now, there's a Netflix special out called Starting 5. It was just released this morning, and I had a chance to look a little bit of it before it came out. Knew it was coming, obviously. They've been promoting it, and essentially they spent some time off the court with 5 players. Netflix did. It's a little bit similar to the quarterback series that they do. Again, where you get a little bit more intimate time with the athletes, and they got 5 pretty good players. Like they got LeBron, Anthony Edwards, Jason Tatum. I skipped over those parts. Domantas Sabonis and LeBron James, right? And Jimmy Butler. Okay,
and
so
Jimmy.
I'm sorry.
And me. Don't forget, I make an appearance on that.
Well, yeah. Okay, we will mention that. About 3 minutes in, they I guess they listened. The producers of Netflix listened to 5 on the Floor because they clipped you.
When we were making
soundbite.
Yeah. Yes. We were basically talking about Jimmy Butler and his leave of absence, and we didn't know at the time what it was about. And Ethan, I respect the hell out of you for how we handled that entire situation and how we handle every one of those situations as we, have players that have personal scenarios pop up.
Yeah. So again, you basically said that they clipped you saying that he was taking a leave of absence, which you did say on the podcast. That's at the very beginning of episode 1. I think there were actually 8 episodes or 10 episodes. They're roughly 45 minutes long each. And again, I haven't gotten a chance to listen to all of it or watch all of it. Anthony Chang from the Herald did transcribe a lot of what was in episode 6. And episode 1, which I did watch this morning, is a little bit about Jimmy and coffee and about dominoes. And his father appears in the episode playing dominoes with him. But what Anthony transcribed today was about episode 6, which is when Jimmy lost his father. And as you mentioned, we knew, as we often do, because when you're around the team, you hear certain things, even though sometimes the athlete doesn't even really tell the team all the specifics of it. We kind of knew what was going on. I will say this, that, we tried to steer everybody in the right direction as much as possible without giving away details that are not our business to give away. I mean, that's essentially what I try to do. So I try to pull people back a little bit when they're very critical of somebody, when they don't really know what's going on with the person's personal life, because these are human beings. They're dealing with things off the court. And I tried to do that with Lowry. There was a situation with Spoelstra over the past couple of years. Tried to do the same, and the same with Jimmy. But I will acknowledge, okay, that I didn't know all the specific dates of when things happened. And I think that one of the things that came up today, and we will address it more on a future episode, is that one of the complaints about Jimmy from us, okay, but also from the team president in his end-of-year press conference, was availability. And all I can tell you is when that Riley press conference happened at the end of last year, and again, I knew that one of the reasons Jimmy had missed time was because of the death of a family member, which, again, I had heard had been his father. I didn't know all the circumstances of it, okay, or when certain things happened, or when, and again, and Anthony chronicles all of it, but essentially, he got a very bad test result back before Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals in 2023, I guess it would be, and then he went to visit his father, I guess right before All-Star break in February, and he asked the doctor, the doctors there, if his father would still be alive when he came back, because he had to go to the game, and they told him, obviously we can't assure you of everything, and his father passed, and this is shown on episode 6. So again, I didn't know all the circumstances of it. I just knew he was dealing with something. We had a general idea what he was dealing with. And I can tell you that when the Riley press conference happened last year, that there was someone close to Jimmy who I did speak to, who was surprised that Pat went all in on the availability thing with Jimmy, because Pat was aware and approved some of Jimmy's time away from the team last year. And I think I said on a podcast at the time when we were reviewing Riley's presser that the way it was put to me was that 15 to 17 of the 22 games that Jimmy missed last year were very legitimate reasons in the view of Jimmy or the people around Jimmy, that it was either significant injury related or related to these personal situations, which the Heat approved of. And that essentially you could say there were like 5 or 6 games maybe that it was like he really didn't feel like playing, or it was load management or something along those lines. And so that their feeling was, and this is why they were surprised by the presser, was that it was kind of a mountain made out of a molehill, because, again, most of Jimmy's availability issues they were aware of or approved of. That this was coming from the Butler side of it. Not Jimmy specifically, but people I talked to around Jimmy. And again, I think that I really believe that Riley's issue was more the games Jimmy did play, that he didn't kind of go full tilt, more so than the 22 games he missed, again, with the people around Jimmy saying that 15 to 17 of those games were sort of unavoidable based on the circumstances. I did see some fans today going back in the Riley presser and getting very upset about the way that Pat had handled it in retrospect, knowing this. And all I'm going to say is that we don't know the conversations that went on. I'm going to admit, as a reporter covering the team, I don't know the conversations that went on between, specifically, I wasn't there, between Jimmy and the team about any of this. And so I really want to wait to do that episode until not only do I have a chance to watch all the episodes of Starting Five and Jimmy's, footage in it, because again, he's about 20% of it, because they got 5 different players that they're chronicling, and also until I have the chance to talk to people inside the organization about this specific thing related to availability. I didn't want to rush into it tonight in the podcast, but I felt like we need to address it because it's out there. And my policy is going to continue to be that I don't talk about players' personal lives. That's it. Like, if they say they're away for personal reasons, they're away for personal reasons. It's not our job or our place, more importantly, to out whatever it is. whether it's a death in the family, a divorce, a custody battle, whatever it is, these are things that athletes go through just like anybody else goes through. And again, it's not my place to do it. And so I feel like we did the right thing there. I know the other media in this town, a lot of them knew what was going on, and they did the same as us. And I appreciate the way that they handled it too. And again, I think that's the way that we should continue to do this. So, I just would caution everybody, when you see a guy who's away for 2, 3, 4 days, if you don't know what it's for, withhold judgment. Withhold judgment. Because I also see the other side of this. Like today, there were a lot of people upset at Pat, but I remember going back to the time when Jimmy was missing time during that period, and there were a lot of people saying trade his ass, when I guess if they were in the same situation as Jimmy Butler there, regardless of what they were being paid, they probably would have handled things the same way that Jimmy did. And that's why, again, I want to caution everybody. All right, now we're going to get to the actual episode today, which is I want to talk about balance of the roster. And I want to talk about it in the context of the way that the Heat view it and the way that they've kind of positioned this thing for this season. But I also want to take a breath. So we're going to introduce a sponsor here before we do. And Greg, you and I then are going to debate this topic. U-Break Wheel Fix. We've talked a lot about water cleanup of Florida this week. And again, WCUFL.com, of course, with the storms coming, a lot of you may need to reach out to them. They're on the west coast of Florida now, but they will be available for jobs here back on the East Coast. But also we know down here in the streets of South Florida, even without a storm, the roads can be really bad. Reach out to Mark and his team. U-Break Wheel Fix. They will get you back on the road. They will fix your damaged wheels. They also can make them look nice if you just want that. But again, we're focusing on the damage this week because there's going to be a lot of it. U-Break Wheel Fix, letter U at the start, ubreakwheelfix.com or U-Break Wheel Fix on Instagram. They can handle everything for you. And if you mention 5 Reasons, they're based in North Miami. If you mention 5 Reasons, you'll get 5.5% off your entire order. So it's ubreakwheelfix.com or 305-748-0112. All right, now let's get to this topic. So, Greg, have I mentioned the whole 5-5-5 thing on here before?
Maybe in passing, but I think it's worth a review.
Okay, so this is how the Heat generally view roster balance. Take the 2 ways out of it, okay? Most of them are going to be young, right? Most of them are going to be, you would assume, going to be under 25 years old. What the Heat strive for, and again, they're not making every move based on this, but what they strive for is to have a balanced roster age-wise. So essentially, you're looking to have 5 players who are 24 years or younger. 5, those are sort of your up-and-comers, right? Those are the guys where they're Kalel Ware. We'll get through the names on this in a second. Then you have 5 that are kind of in what's considered to be sort of the athletic prime. Okay, so for your players 24 and under, these are guys that probably their bodies are ahead of their brains right now, right? Like they're better athletically, right? They're better athletically, okay, but they don't really know where to be in all spots. They're still learning, learning the system. Basketball IQ is developing. Then you've got 25 to 32, and these are the players that, and I think the 32 it's pushed from 30, 31, 32, because again, players can stay in prime shape longer now, where these are the guys who are supposed to be in the prime of their career, where essentially their brains are catching up to their bodies, right? But this is where you start to see guys who should be at their peak. And then you've got players 33 and older who are the ones, and the Heat are a little bit backwards on this because they're relying on somebody who's over 32 years old. But these are the guys who are really your mentor types, a lot of cases, good guys to have on the roster. They know what their role is. And this is 33 and over. Okay.
And can play key roles, because there's been a lot of guys that have came in late in their career and done really big things. So not to dismiss them, but obviously they can't be the heavy lifters on the roster.
Well, they shouldn't be, although the Heat have one guy who's in the category who we just talked about. So, yes. But the idea is to try to have, as something as close to 5-5-5 in those categories. But if you're going to have more in any one category, you want it in the middle category. Okay. So what I think is interesting is I was going back as I was reminded of this when I was in the Bahamas, as I talked to some Heat people about their roster, is that I went back and looked at some recent rosters. And I can tell you that from an overall balance perspective, in terms of what the Heat are striving for, this one's closer than recent ones that they've had, at least in terms, again, of the age makeup of it. So let's go through it. 24 and younger, Nikola Jovic is 21. Tyler Hero is 24. Won't turn 25 until January. Jaime Jaquez is 23. I'm skipping Josh Christopher because he's two-way, but he's 22. Pelle Larsson coming in at age 23. Kalel Ware, 20. So I'm at 5 guys already, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to count Kashad Johnson because he's two-way, even though we're expecting him to play.
No, you got the group.
And that's the group. And then Isaiah Stevens also competing for a spot, Exhibit 10, but we're not counting it. So we've got 5 guys in that category, all of whom have pretty high-end potential. I mean, that's the thing that's different about this roster. Jovic projects as a starting power forward. Tyler Hero has already been 6th man of the year, projects as a starting 2 guard. Jaime Jaquez projects as a 6th man of the year candidate. Pelle Larsson is a guy that I think we've taken to very quickly. They've taken to very quickly. He's probably going to play some minutes this year. And Kalel Ware has everybody excited, and we're trying to tone down the excitement a little bit.
You know what jumps out?
Pretty good group.
What jumps out is like that all 5 of those guys have a chance to contribute this year. But here's the other thing. None of them are redundant. Like, that's the cool part about having all those guys in this age group, and none of them are tripping over themselves in the same spots and stuff like that. They feel like they're complementary. So that's, if we're going to hope traffic a bit as we look at the roster, the balanced element of this young group, I think, is a really cool way, to build a young team around these older guys that we'll get to.
You know, the other difference between this and the other young groups, they were all drafted. All 5 of these guys were drafted. For a team that relies on the undrafteds, the balance seems to be more appropriate now where the undrafteds are in the two-way spots or competing for the two-way spots. Your young core are drafted players who, to this point, Jaquez and Hero, and I don't want to hear it about Tyler because you argue with me about this, you're wrong. Jaquez and Hero have outpaced their draft positions. Right?
That's not
– we're not – well, there are some people in on Tyler who are going to say no, and I'm going to say you're insane because he would be top 6 or top 7 if you – okay. And Jovic will this year. There's no question. I mean, I don't think there's any – all right? And then we're waiting to see on Ware and Larson, but in both cases, I think there's a pretty good chance that they're going to be better than their draft positions. I mean, Ware was just first-team All-Summer League. I mean, against a lot of guys who – and I'm not saying that's the end-all, be-all, but – he's projecting.
If we just go off what we saw, you're right.
Okay. So I think that's positive. Then you look at the middle group, okay? Bam Adebayo is 27. Terry Rozier is 30. Duncan Robinson is 30. Josh Richardson is 31. Haywood Highsmith is 27. Thomas Bryant is 27.
That's the group.
So that's 6 in that group. Also, Drew Smith is 26, who is a two-way and an undrafted player.
Just had to say it.
I'm just saying. They're in that group. Okay, now, I think the one thing that people would argue against this group is that with the exception of Bam, there's not a lot of star power in a group where you probably would want there to be more.
Yeah, that's true.
Rozier's borderline, right?
Because Jimmy is now obviously in the tier we'll talk about in a minute. So, like, that's part of the roster build. Bam is kind of the headliner here. I do think Duncan and Terry are the keys here. And really, when you look at this roster and compare it to previous ones, he's the guy. Like, they had Kyle in the other age bracket if we were to do this exercise with that other team. And so now they're looking for Terry to come in and really make an impact. And so they've bet on that Terry Rozier move paying off. And you can see it by the way that he is, the next best player in that grouping behind Bam.
Now, Nasir Little is technically the 15th, right?
I think
even though it's not guaranteed for the season. Nasir was, and again, we don't know if he's going to stick beyond January 7th, but he was born. Let's see, he would be in that first group, right? He's still just because he came into the league so young. I'm trying to find the birth date here. Hold on, he is. Let's see. I probably should have looked him up before, but again, I forgot that that he had one of the
I don't know that he's going to stick around. He's 24.
He's 24. Okay, so he would be in that first group. So if he's going to be in any group at all, he would be in that first group. And then the older group, there's only 3. And that's why I said I just wanted the numbers to add up right. So it would be, if you're going to put Little in that first group, it'd be 6, 6, and then you're looking at 3 here. And the 3 are Jimmy at age 35, Kevin Love at 36, and Alec Burks at 33, who appears he's going to play a role this year, which is something we've been trying to signal to everybody, that as soon as Spo got his hands on him, he was going to see Wayne Ellington too. And that's kind of where we're at right now. I think this is, again, the question that fans would have about it, because I think other than this, the balance is really good. I think the balance is better than they've had in recent years for the exact reason that I said at the beginning, which is that you have 5 young players with pretty high upsides, drafted players, all players that you scouted and it appears that you've hit on, who are in that group. Precious would have been in that group too, I guess, if that had panned out. But essentially, you have these 5 guys. The middle group, maybe you don't have as much star power as you'd like, but you do have Bam, and you do have guys like, again, Duncan and Terry, who would be rotation players pretty much on any team in the league. Okay, I guess Josh is a little more borderline at this stage, but those guys would be rotation players anywhere in the league. But I think the issue, again, is when you look at is that your guy you're asking to carry in a lot of ways is in that advanced group. And what I'll say about the balance of this roster is, and I'm not, again, convinced one way or the other how this is going to go with Jimmy this year, whether or not they get contract year Jimmy and he just sets the league ablaze and they have no choice but to give him the extension because everybody's going to go nuts if they don't. And he accepts the extension because he really wants to be here. And we have 3 more years or 2 more years or whatever, of Jimmy Butler. I don't know which direction. But I will say that the way that this roster sets up right now, it is ready-made for, if Jimmy's not the one, for another star to come in with it. If Bam can at least be a 1B.
Yeah. Well, there's one of 2 ways that can happen. It can either be that, Jimmy, like, let's say Jimmy were not to move on, but let's say he gets his extension and everything is okay in Miami, but that's just where he ends his career. But even the alternate, let's just say he were to go elsewhere. You have either a young core and Bam, and eventually you'd have flexibility. You'd have to maneuver, though. Like, it wouldn't be instant flexibility by any stretch. But the other thing you could do is take those 24 and unders and flip them for another guy. So, like, that's the other part of this that we will have to keep in mind and, hope that Miami continues to fill the pipeline. But like that, those are the 2 ways to get another guy around Bam. So they are set up for a transition to happen quickly.
Well, 4 of the 5 under, and not including Little, 4 of the 5 under 25s are in very friendly contracts. I mean, the only one who's not is Tyler, right? So any of those 4 guys are flippable. The question would be, if ultimately that's the direction that they go, the question becomes then, how do they pair them with other salary? What other salaries do they pair them with to go get the guys that the salaries match? So that would be one of the questions there. So there's really different ways to look at balanced rosters. There's balanced rosters in terms of age, which we're getting into here, in terms of talent, but also in terms of contract. And we've done that episode a couple times this offseason about how they are in a little bit of a weird spot because, you've got Jimmy and you got Bam, and then you've got Tyler and Terry combined kind of making one max contract between them, right? In terms of if your max players are getting paid about $50 million this year. I mean, Terry and Tyler are about, $53 million, something along those lines. And then you've got Duncan, so you've got about $70 million between those 3 guys, which is a little bit of a different roster salary cap construction than other teams have right now. And that's why, again, it becomes this issue of whether Jimmy can live up to that salary or you need these salary numbers to move so that someone else can do that. But they have position themselves to go a lot of different directions. And I think we have touched on that this offseason, but this really puts it into perspective. I cannot remember being as excited about an under 25 core as I am about this one.
No, you're right. And that's in Heat history. Like the only other one would be when Karan and Dwayne were there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but I mean, that's Dwayne.
And UD
so like,
and UD, to be fair. So they had.
I was thinking there was probably somebody else that we thought Rasul Butler at the time was also part of that young group that they thought.
May he rest in peace. Yeah, I think that I think Rasul would have been the other. He was a second round pick, and that 03-04 team. And when Odom came in, he was 24.
So there you go. That's the second best group.
So that would be one. And the reason I know that is because at the Sun Sentinel at the time, we did one of the projects that was the most fun for me to do in a newspaper when we used to actually do these kind of things is that I picked 12 athletes under age 25 in the Florida teams, and we did some mixed photo shoots. So I'll tell this story just to close this episode because we've been all over the place. But essentially, we were trying to match up. I remember our photographer, Mike Stocker, we were trying to set everything up with these kind of classy photo shoots at different venues in South Florida, right? So we did one on South Beach with Chris Chambers, the Dolphins, who I've remained in touch with through the years. And at the time, looked like he was going to totally blow up. The concussion hurt him quite a bit. But it was Chambers, Lamar Odom, and Karan on South Beach. So we did that at the Clevelander. We did one with, of all people, Roberto Luongo and David Boston. We couldn't find anybody else under 25, and there were high hopes for David Boston coming in. This tells you everything you need to know about the Dolphins. So we did that one at Dolphins camp. And then we did one at the stadium with Randy McMichael and Dontrell Willis.
Really being excited about both of those guys.
Randy actually is a radio host in Georgia now. And with Dontrell, Randy McMichael, and Miguel Cabrera. That's a sad photo because you think about Cabrera ends up being a Hall of Famer somewhere else, of course, because the Marlins are the Marlins. But then the last one we tried to do was Dwayne Wade and Josh Beckett. And I always tell this story, and I will tell it to the end of time because of what ended up happening to Josh Beckett and what ended up happening to Dwayne Wade. So Josh had just come off helping the Marlins win a World Series, right? So we figured this is going to be our centerpiece photo. Dwayne coming off his rookie season. He's next, right? But Josh Beckett has just done it. Two of them are going to do it together. Dwayne, at that time, coming off his rookie year, he didn't get a driver or anything. He drove himself to the stadium. He had a Chrysler 300. He drove to the stadium, and we're waiting to do a photo shoot with Josh, and Josh just blew it off. He blew off Dwayne Wade. So I'm sitting there with Dwayne at the stadium, and I'm like, I'm so sorry about this. I mean, was it? That's the type of person Josh was, actually, to be honest. And Dwayne ended up, trying to get in the batting cage with Juan Pierre and all that stuff. And I will say, Dwayne never complained. We took solo photos of him by himself.
And now it's Wade County.
And now it's Wade County. And Dwayne ended up being the number one guy. But you just trigger that memory for me because it was Karan, Lamar, and Dwayne were all under 25 as well as Haslam. And I think as we close, you can make the argument this is the most exciting young core they've had since then, right?
Yeah. And so that is, if nothing else, when we're trying to assess, the viability of the Jimmy era, but also after that, because obviously he also has indicated he didn't want to play forever anyway. So you have to kind of start to wrestle with that fact. I think that the Heat have positioned themselves, and it's cool and ironic that they've done it via first round and I guess a couple second round draft picks. But for a lot of those guys are all first round picks. And so it's interesting to see the way that they've done it every different way. They've now built either, you had Max and Gabe that were, undrafted guys that they had kind of brought up, and then they had those roles. And now these are all drafted guys. The developmental system is unbelievable, unparalleled.
It's 4 first-round picks and Pele, basically. And then, like I said, you've got the undrafted guys who are slotting in other spots. Just to close the loop on that story, Josh Beckett never apologized for that, ever. And then he had arm trouble later in his career, and I didn't mind that at all. Anyway, I'm not going to make the argument that this young core is going to be better than that young core because that young core had Dwayne Wade. So we can't do that. But
Hell
you know what
no.
happened to that? You know what happened to that young core, and you hit on it, and that's what people are going to take for this episode. Pat traded 2 of them the next year. So who's Shaq 2? I don't know. Who would be the Shaq in this case? I'm not sure. Anyway, thanks to Greg. We will hit that Jimmy episode in more depth again after more conversations are had. We didn't want to ignore what's on social media today, but I also don't want to come into anything like this totally unprepared. So we will do that. I do recommend everybody watch the Netflix special. It's well done. It's really it had my attention, and provided that the power stays on, I'm going to watch more of it tonight. All right. Thanks again to Greg. Check out the rest of our episodes. Stay safe, everybody. You Break, We'll Fix, Water Cleanup of Florida. Those are our 2 sponsors we're going to talk about the most here. Make sure you're safe on the roads, and make sure you're safe in your house. Have a good one.
Thank you for listening to the 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. After all, someone needs to listen to my dad.